What is wrong with them? What is wrong with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia, with the Emirates, with Jordan? Why do their palaces fall silent while Gaza burns? Why do their leaders freeze while their people roar in the streets? The answer is not diplomatic. It is not strategic. The answer is psychological. These regimes are trapped in the mind of authoritarian survival. Rulers who fear their own people more than they fear their enemies. Men haunted not by Gaza's rubble, but by the ghost of the Arab Spring. Authoritarian psychology follows one script: survival first, morality last. And in Cairo, in Riyadh, in Abu Dhabi, in Amman, every decision bends to this cold equation. Look at Egypt. Sisi opens Rafah by a trickle, issues empty statements, but never dares full solidarity. Why? Because Gaza is Hamas. Hamas is the Brotherhood, and the Brotherhood is the nightmare that almost toppled him. To aid Gaza is to empower his enemy within. Look at Saudi Arabia. Mohammed bin Salman drapes himself in Vision 2030, skyscrapers, concerts, sports. For him, Gaza is an interruption. His psychology is loss aversion at scale. Don't risk American guarantees, don't scare investors, don't tarnish the brand. What is the life of a child in Gaza compared to the loss of a $10 billion deal? Look at the Emirates. They signed the Abraham Accords and called it pragmatism. In truth, it is hedging. Cling to Israel's tech, America's security, global markets. Palestine reduced to a talking point. To the UAE, Gaza is not a cause. Gaza is a reputational risk. Look at Jordan, a kingdom with a Palestinian majority, a people who believe they are the loudest defenders of Palestine. But their king is paralyzed by fear. Fear of losing US aid, fear of Israeli retaliation. Fear that protests will turn against him. He gives his citizens pens to scream inside, then cages them back into silence. Egypt fears mobilization. Saudi fears its modernization interrupted. The UAE fears reputational damage. Jordan fears collapse. Different details. The same psychology, survival before solidarity. Their silence is not weakness. It is not incompetence, and it is deliberate. It is authoritarian logic working exactly as designed. Protect the palace, even if Gaza burns. Why do they measure words like poison in a cup? Because they are ruled by loss aversion. Humans fear losses twice as much as gains. For these rulers, loss is amplified 100-fold. A throne, a crown, a palace, a life. Every decision warped by the primal fear: don't lose what you already have. Egypt clings to $1.3 billion in US aid, suicide in their mind to jeopardize it. Jordan depends on Washington's billions. Aid is not money. Aid is oxygen. Saudi Arabia fears losing modernization momentum more than it fears losing Palestinians, and the Emirates fear losing their safe haven image more than they fear losing their humanity. Better to lose Gaza than to lose the regime. Better to lose dignity than to lose subsidies. But hypocrisy is not theirs alone. Europe and the United States speak of universal values while practicing selective morality. Why is Ukraine's defense called freedom, while Gaza's defense is called terror? Why are Russian bombs war crimes, but Israeli bombs self-defense? This is moral hierarchy, the instinct to rank lives. In the Western subconscious, European lives weigh more than Arab lives. It is not admitted, but it is visible in every speech, every silence, every veto. Psychologists call it in-group bias. Outrage explodes for some victims and evaporates for others. And the Arab regimes know. They adapt. They recognize that the US will never cut aid over Palestinian deaths. But it will cut aid if their regimes destabilize. They learn the game. They play it. This is what is wrong with them. They fear losing power more than they fear losing Gaza. They fear losing aid more than they fear losing legitimacy. Their silence is not ignorance. It is calculation. Why do they tremble more at their own people chanting than at Gaza's children screaming? Because in the authoritarian mind, the greatest threat is not Israel. The greatest threat is their own streets. Sisi crushed the Brotherhood. To him, Hamas is sedition. MBS is burying clerics under neon towers. Hamas is everything he is trying to erase. Mohammed bin Zayed engineered a surveillance state to suffocate Islamism before it breathes. Hamas is contagion. King Abdullah balances on a knife's edge, terrified a spark from Gaza could ignite his whole kingdom. This is authoritarian threat avoidance. Every rally is rebellion in rehearsal. Every chant is contagion. They smother, they surveil, they censor. They fear their own people more than they fear the screams of bombed children. And how do they live with this? By numbing themselves, by disengaging morally. They shift blame. Hamas brought this. They minimize, it's complicated. They distract. Look at our reforms, our modernization. They convince themselves silence is stability. Psychologists call it moral disengagement, the numbing of conscience. Empty words replace action. Token gestures mask betrayal. Cairo says, we send aid. Riyadh says, we call for peace. Abu Dhabi says, we are for stability. Amman says, we mediate. These are not answers. They are anesthesia. But here is the darker truth. The West plays the same games. Washington lectures on democracy while arming bombardment. Brussels condemns Moscow but excuses Tel Aviv. London weeps for Ukraine but turns away from Gaza. This is moral exclusion, drawing a boundary around whose lives matter and whose don't. The hypocrisy is exposed. Ukraine inside the circle, Palestine outside, and the Arab regimes borrow that same psychology. They mirror it, adopt it, excuse themselves with it. If the West ranks lives unequally, why should they sacrifice to rank them differently? But the people know. They chant shame in the streets. They see their rulers normalize with Israel while Gaza bleeds. They know the palace lies. They feel the hypocrisy gap growing wider. And every hypocrisy gap has a breaking point. The more they repress outrage, the more legitimacy drains. The more they bow to Washington, the more trust erodes. Fear can control, but fear cannot command respect. What is wrong with them, and what is wrong with Europe, with America? Those who preach values while funding destruction. What is wrong with leaders who cry for Ukraine but look away from Gaza? The answer, again, is psychological. The West operates on the same mental distortions as the Arab regimes. They just cloak it in the language of democracy and human rights. Moral exclusion is the invisible line we draw around which lives deserve empathy and which lives are disposable. It's why Western capitals lit up in blue and yellow for Ukraine, but not a single landmark glowed in the colors of Palestine. It's why refugees from Kiev were welcomed, while refugees from Gaza are branded a threat. The brain creates categories of us and them. Once people are outside the circle, their suffering doesn't register the same way. This bias never vanished. Colonial psychology taught Europe and America to rank human worth, to see European lives as first class, Arab and African lives as second class. That logic still lingers. It just changes vocabulary. Strategic interests, national security. But the psychology is the same. Russia bombs an apartment block. It is called barbaric. Israel bombs an apartment block. It is called collateral. Russia blocks food, weaponizing hunger. Israel blocks food, protecting itself. Russia annexes land. Illegal occupation. Israel annexes land. Disputed territory. The same crimes, different labels. This is not principle. This is psychology. This is dissonance management. Western leaders cannot admit their ally commits the same crimes they condemn in Russia, so they twist the narrative. Ukraine is innocent. Gaza is complicated. Ukraine is democracy. Gaza is terrorism. These are not rational arguments. They are survival mechanisms for conscience. And Arab regimes copy the playbook. Two faces, one for their people, one for their patrons. Sisi blames Hamas. MBS normalizes. MBZ hosts Israeli delegations. Abdullah talks Jerusalem while coordinating intelligence. Europe perfects selective outrage. America codifies moral hierarchy. Arab regimes mirror it for survival. Together they construct a global architecture of hypocrisy, but citizens everywhere see through it. In Berlin, London, New York, Young voices march for Gaza, defying bans, risking arrest. In Cairo, Amman, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, citizens chant even when they know the police are watching. Around the world, the public conscience stirs. It recognizes what leaders will not say. Morality has been hollowed out by fear, by alliances, by psychology. And yet, rulers double down, because they believe control outlasts conscience, because they think silence smothers truth, because they are addicted to the illusion of safety, even as legitimacy decays. So, what is wrong with them? What is wrong is that they have reduced morality to performance, solidarity to symbolism, human life to calculation. They have exposed not only their politics, but the psychology of power itself. Gaza exposes not just bombs. Gaza exposes the authoritarian mind. Gaza exposes Western duplicity. Gaza exposes the darkest instincts of the human brain, to divide lives into worthy and unworthy, to disengage from conscience when fear rules, to protect the throne while humanity collapses. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is psychology weaponized against morality. This is why the people shout while their rulers remain quiet. This is why Europe's outrage is selective. This is why America's morality fractures, and this is why the silence of the powerful is louder than the screams of the weak.